Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Saucy Marriage Weekend, and I am your special host this time, Willie Johnson. What's going on, everybody? And guess who I have here? I shouldn't even say guess because you already
Yes,
know it's Miss
yes.
Imani. Miss Imani, let me tell you, I actually, why are you shaking your head? Because you know
'Cause
I'm
I
about
know
to.
what you're gonna say, but go ahead.
I messed her name up one time, y'all. I promise you, I felt so bad. She told me, she was like, no, you said my name wrong, Willie. She put me in check, y'all. So you know what? That's a good segue to say she's going to make sure she keep y'all in check as well too with this communication in your relationship. So what's going on there, my sister?
Yes, I'm excited to be on this side of the interviews, but I've just been having a good time. I've just been enjoying myself in watching all of the segments again, even though I've seen them obviously, but watching all of the segments and I'm ready. I'm excited to just talk to the people and have it be you. You, me,
Yes,
and you and Amina. Amina was the
hey, I'm never gonna get over that. I promise you all. I'm never gonna get over it. But so we're gonna jump right into it. So one thing, just following you for a long time, doing training and all with you, and just seeing now, you really speak about communication.
yeah.
And I didn't understand the significance of it as well until I started going through things and actually went to counseling. What made you just decide, hey, this is something that I want to make sure that I focus on as well too, because it's so important.
Yeah, so I because I didn't, I guess, formally introduce myself.
Oh,
No, it's okay. I was just thinking about that. I'm like, all the other segments, I'm like, I'm all about you, the other person. But I will say, hey, Imani Aisha, and I am a lover of purple. I love short walks to the refrigerator for plant-based eats. And I'm a mama and a wife and a marriage coach. And yeah, I help folks who are in committed relationships, but I help married folk really master communication in their marriage so they can have more peace and more partnership and more freedom because that's what we want, right? So yeah, that's what I do. And for me, I'm a child of divorce. I'm a twice child of divorce, but I feel like that's a longer story. At least that's what I kind of identify with. Um and I really saw growing up what I felt wasn't good around communication and a lot of things that weren't said. I think when you see your parents go through stuff, you do see it. You feel it. You see them talking to themselves and not to each other. You hear the things that they say, and you're kind of this third party fly on the wall. And so that was my experience growing up until I went off to college and my parents decided that they were going to split ways. And I was always kind of deep in communication because when I was in middle school, I was a conflict mediator. I don't know if y'all had that in middle school. We called it junior high school. I'm from New York, but I'm trying to speak to the masses. Middle school, you had a little sash. It said conflict mediator, and you went out during recess. And if any of your peers had an argument or they were upset with their friend, you came in and you helped them bridge the gap. You helped them mend. You helped them talk it out. And I was a writer. So, dialogue, communication, words, it was always a part of my life. But I think knowing that I want to apply that to relationships started with my parents, and I started writing relationships too as a creative writer growing up. So I think that had a lot to do with laying the foundation for when I decided that I was going to become a coach, to say I want to go that route.
Oh, okay. It's for one, I have never heard of what was it,
Conflict mediator.
conflict mediator.
Yeah.
That's actually a good thing. I
Yeah.
never heard of that. Like
Yeah.
that, it actually not only builds the bonds and the trust between the students, but also too, it helps the person that's coming up with it to talk through it more and help the kids as well too be okay with talking about it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes kids don't want to talk to grown-ups about things because they feel like
Right.
grown-ups don't understand
Don't
as if they've never been teenagers. You
and these
feel me?
are like middle school, junior high school, middle school. So you're like
Yeah, yeah,
pre-high school, so you really think you're grown. But I was
really
their
think you
peer,
grow.
same age, and I would come in and do the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. So look, I want to. This is something that I think is very important that people should know.
Yeah.
From your perspective, how do you define communication um, for relationships and its importance?
It's just it doesn't really matter. All that I'm just kidding. No, it's because I
You about
it's
to say,
really
oh,
it doesn't. I'm about to blow your mind, right? No, it's very much matters. I think for me, communication is what we say and what we don't say to our partners, and how safe we feel with being vulnerable with ourselves and with our partners. I mean, that to me encompasses it, because those are usually where the issues arise when it comes to communication.
mhm,
So we don't always realize it's about what we say and what we don't say, or what we
yeah,
say with our bodies. And we don't always realize how much or how little we don't trust ourselves and our partners to be completely vulnerable. So, you know, I did.
that's the trusting ourselves and our partners to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Like you just hit the nail flat, slap, cut all on the head. That's important though because
Yeah.
I think people don't. I know for me, I didn't realize how closed off I was emotionally, but verbally,
Verbally.
verbally.
Mhm.
That's yeah, caught me right there. I would say this is how I feel, right?
Yeah.
But then I would be told, well, but it's just something about you just don't show me, what you're saying. And I didn't understand the significance of both, knowing that you have to communicate not only through your mouth, but also through your energy as well, too. Because if I tell you I love you and I just look at you like that, yeah, I'm saying it, but my actions and all doesn't line up with what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's right there. That need to be on a shirt. That needs to be a statement on the shirt.
We definitely speak with our energy. You come home, you have an attitude, or you tired, or you just don't feel like it. We definitely
Yeah,
we a lot of times I think we'll speak with our energy, and at least you're verbal, because then we won't speak with our mouths. And you
yeah,
can tell it's like, look, so what's wrong? Nothing. Well, we know that's not true. I
that's it.
already know that you're not fine and it's not
Right.
nothing. So
Mm,
what's up? And I get why we can be closed off times, because even with me, when I first met my husband, he'll say, yeah, you taught me how to communicate, because again, I came from this space of communicating, but I didn't know how to communicate with him. I had to really learn that with him. But I would try to be like, okay, so what is it? What's it really about? And I would call him on different stuff, like, that's it's not about that. Like, and luckily he was receptive to it. Then when we were dating, he was receptive to it. But I still had to, even for me, pull back a little bit and really give space, because I was that person who was like, I need you to tell me what's going on. What's on? I know it's not cool, but he's a processor. He needed the space to be able to process. And I had to understand that over time, that communicating with him looked different, and that I could use this space as well. And a lot of times we don't really think about those nuances and how we talk to each other, because I definitely had to get that down. And for me, realizing what it is that I needed as a communicator, and what it is that the things that kept me from being vulnerable, knowing that I'm usually an open book, so it's rare, but if it happens, it's a pretty deep trigger for
yeah.
me. And I was like, well, I got to recognize this, because I don't want a marriage where I can't speak my mind, or I don't feel like I can, or I don't feel like it's going to be received, because guess what? Sometimes it wasn't. That was the thing that held me up. But I had to decide I was going to share anyway, and we would work the other stuff out. You know what I'm saying?
I want to touch on something that you said because everything that you just said, it is hitting the spot. But you said that communication is different for different people. You had to learn how to communicate with them
Yeah.
because you were open to communication. You knew about it, right? So I don't think people really think of it that way. That yeah, I love to talk and I love to communicate with people.
Mhm.
But me communicating with Sally is not the same way I have to communicate with Jennifer, right?
Right.
So when we don't do that and we think, okay, well, I learned how to communicate over here. so I'm gonna force it over here. We don't
Mhm.
realize how detrimental that can be because we're not asking how to communicate. We're just assuming that you want to be communicated to that way. And I
Yeah.
think that definitely is something that once again, that's another gem that dropped on me. I'm gonna put that in my jury box right there of gems for you today.
You're true. You know what?
Yes.
I see that dynamic a lot when I'm working with a couple or talking with a couple where one or both of them have been married before. You've been married
Oh,
before, right? And this is your
yeah.
second marriage. And so there's all of this stuff that floods. Like, I know what I don't want. I know what didn't work. I know how to communicate. I know what this relationship needs to work. And you're
Mhm.
coming to the space almost as an authority, for lack of a better word, into the space of like, I know how this works, I know how it didn't work and what needs to happen. But there is an element of pushing, there is an element of forcing, as opposed to being open to understanding, well, what does this person need to communicate, what do I need, how do we actually function as communicators, because it's usually different, and how do we navigate that? We're just looking at it like, okay, so you need to do this, like this is how you need to do it. And we get into this telling mode, and the dynamic starts to be off, because as much as we don't like to talk about it, it starts to feel like parent child. It starts to feel like, a dynamic that feels like, okay, you're the one and I'm over here. And really, you can learn from each other, so you have to be open to that. Even if you have learned some things, that's great, but you can also still learn.
Yes. Speaking from a personal experience, I've dealt with someone that was like, they had to be married before twice. I've never
Mm.
been married. So they was like, I know how to do marriage right. And I would be thinking, oh,
You was thinking about the divorces, shame on you.
I'm like, you've been divorced twice. So I don't know. But at the end of the day, I'm like, you have been married,
Yeah.
so you did learn some things, and but I didn't realize you could have learned all the wrong things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and just to piggyback off what you were saying as well too, I think when you're doing that, when two people have been married before, they need to come into the dynamic as we are both students instead of one is the teacher and one is the student. We're both students, so we need to learn how to communicate with each other. Although we have learned how to communicate with others,
Mhm.
we are two different people and we have to make this work for us.
Absolutely. It's a new relationship. And again, that leans into the opportunity. I think I said it in our interview, but marriage is an opportunity to be at a heightened state of awareness of self, your spouse, and thus your marriage. And so, you in this new marriage, it's an opportunity to build something different with this person. This is why you got remarried in the first place. And so you don't want to shirk that opportunity. You don't want to block it by trying to bring things into the space, even if they feel like good things. This is the reason why, look, for however people may come for me, I caution people. I'm like, if your grandmama, your granddaddy, your parents had this amazing relationship, your next door neighbor, your sister, your brother, that's great, but that's not your relationship. That's not you.
Mhm.
So when you start to kind of bring all that stuff in, you have to be able to discern what their stuff is and their voice, and where your voice begins, so that you can have a relationship that feels like you, that feels aligned with you, and not whatever worked for them, but what's really going to work for you. And it may very well be different.
Yeah, because we can talk about. I hear a lot of people say, grandmama and granddad had long, strong relationships, but granddad had another family too.
Yeah.
You-
Oh yeah.
They don't communicate about those behind. Yeah, they don't argue in front of you, but
Yeah.
behind closed doors, they may hate each other. And
Yeah.
then when you don't talk about how to overcome that, now you have people or children, men and little boys and little girls growing up thinking that it's a fairy tale when it comes to marriage and not telling them, no, listen, you have to talk, you have to
Yeah.
communicate, you have to be able to willing to say to yourself what I am going to deal with and what I'm not going to deal with.
Mm.
Because a lot of the things that the women dealt with back then, a lot of
Mhm.
women won't deal with those things now, and
Facts.
we're seeing that, right?
Facts.
And
Yeah.
not saying that it's not. I'm not even saying that the women, our grandmothers and grandfathers and things, where we'll say they were emotionally and mentally stronger
Yeah.
to deal with that. But I don't think that's a good thing that we could say, hey, you know what? I can deal with a lot of turmoil in life and hurt and pain.
Yeah.
No, we're not supposed to go through life and deal with pain and hurt and trauma all the time.
Right.
That's not a good thing to say, hey, I know how to handle this because I go through it all the time. That's
Right.
not good.
Right.
That's a breakdown in communication with yourself.
Yeah.
What is it that you're doing to continue to bring this into your life?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You hit it right there to say you never know unless you live with them, you don't know what's going on in another marriage. And a lot of
Yeah.
times we think we measure the quality of the relationship based upon the length of time that the couple's been together. And
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
is a fallacy. It truly is. Now, I'm not saying that time you don't get to go through things, you don't get to learn things, etc.,
Yeah.
about each other. But the reality is I know couples that have a really really strong communication connection. They're able to move through conflict with more ease, and they've been married a year. You know what I'm saying? And I know
Mhm.
people that have been married 14 years that hardly talk to each other. And so you can't place the value or the health of your marriage on how long it's been. And a lot of times with grandparents who've been together for a long time, we start to do that, right? And then it definitely comes in. I remember I was watching this show because sometimes I like to watch those like reality relationship shows, not the one where they on the beach and they all pretty, but like the more experimental ones, like where you gotta, get married without seeing each other and those kinds of things.
Oh,
Yeah, I think it's just really intriguing to see folks do that, right? You know what I mean? You might be the next contestant, Willie, on Married at
no,
First
no, I can't. I need to see you. I need to see you. I'm just gonna be honest, but I'm gonna let you go.
but
I'm gonna let you go.
but the dynamic between these two as they were learning each other, you know, he was like, don't iron on the bed. And she was like, why? He was like, look, you just don't do that. He went and got, he was like, but what are you thinking? Like he kind of went in on her about ironing the bed. And she's like, I don't know why he's talking to me like that. And in the aside, he was like, well, my grandmother and my grandfather, she just did it. Like she didn't have words with my grandfather when he said certain things. Like that's how she rolled. She knew that's how he was. And they had a long lasting marriage. But like you were saying before, you don't know if she was just biting her tongue. You don't know
Mhm.
if she didn't feel comfortable to voice what it was that she was feeling, but he had idolized that relationship so much that he was trying to recreate it. And I think that's where the danger comes in around communication, because communication is also about seeing the other person, about accepting them for who they are. And when you block the acceptance, or you don't feel fully accepted for who you are, the intimacy level is not going to be where you want it to be.
Yeah, it's crazy that you said that. I was. Somebody had posted something on Facebook. A young lady that I went to school with. She was like, if a man, it was some meme, but like if a man doesn't pay all the bills and he doesn't do this or do that, then he's not going. I can't deal with him because he's not a real man, right?
Mm,
And people was commenting, and
I'm sure.
she was like, my grandfather, he was when he took care of, he had all his kids, his grandkids, and all. Like he was a real man. And her cousin that talked to her grandfather said, "Yeah, but granddaddy died broke and lonely.
Mm,
Although he was married to grandmother, like he started saying this on social media. He was like, although she was hell to deal with, right? So it's like it comes to the point where you think sometimes just being quiet
yeah.
will make it better, but it actually doesn't.
Oh,
It makes it
yeah.
worse
Yeah.
because now you have prime example is some of the cousins was on there talking about the grandmother and how good she was, and some of them was talking about the grandfather and how good he was, but they was going against each other.
Right.
It was no unity, and then I and it's they're separated from each other. But I
Mhm.
also go to was Harry and Meghan, from England, that the story they did with Oprah, right?
Mhm.
And he was talking about how they were drowning behind closed doors, but then
Mhm.
people would see them out, and he was like it was a job. So they were saying, hey, although we was drowning behind closed doors, when they would tell us it's time to be on, we have to put everything that we're feeling, everything that we're dealing with to the side to look like we're together,
Mm,
but we're screaming out for help behind closed doors. And
mhm.
so many people don't even they don't even scream behind
No.
closed doors. They
Mm,
just are quiet.
right.
So now you're killing a situation that has the potential to give you life
Yeah.
because you're not willing to communicate that you need resuscitation on that.
Yeah.
So I think that's very important what you're saying, and
Yeah.
how communication can break, it can heal, it can create. There's so many things that communication can do, but you
Mhm.
have to learn how to do that with whoever it is specifically that you're dealing with.
Specifically.
So
Right.
let me ask you this question: with like a lot of the marriage couples that you work with and people you work with, what is one of the biggest lessons that you could say you have learned about what you teach people with communicating with one another?
Mm. The one of the biggest epiphanies for me was the commonality in it. Like that everybody, even though, because it sounds contradictory because we're talking about how each relationship is unique, right? Which it is. Every individual, every relationship is unique. But I remember sitting down at one point, and this is right before I wrote my book, because I was like, oh, what I'm gonna write about, and da da da. And I had kind of came to this realization when I was looking at the breadth of my work. I was looking at my own relationship. I was like, everybody's kind of saying the same thing. Everybody's desiring the same thing. The techniques that they need, the foundational techniques that they need to be able to be confident about their communication and to really master that in their own marriage. And when I say master, I mean not that things aren't going to go haywire, because they always will. The inevitable will happen, but that you know what to do when it happens. You have the tools to handle it so that you're not kind of out there in limbo. But I was like, they're all the same thing. And so I remember writing that down and realizing, okay, this is a framework for really how best to communicate with your spouse, even though we have the nuances. And that was a big lesson for me just in listening, right? I always talk about the folks that I would had the privilege of working with and that I have the privilege of working with helped me to create that framework because it's based upon conversations that we had, that I was able to see the common thread and looking at my past and folks I dated and looking at my parents and my own marriage. And that was a big one, for me. You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
That's the funny thing is as you was talking, I was thinking about, I like to use metaphors when I'm talking or a
Yes.
story.
We love a good
Uh,
metaphor.
but you have to think about, like, when you go into a subdivision and they're just building that subdivision, right? When they have the frames up, you cannot tell the difference between the frames, but every house has a frame. It's
Hmm.
not until that person that has purchased that house specifically say, I want it to look like this. Now, once they build the frame look like everybody else, but the outside and what's inside of it as well too looks different.
Yeah.
So that's the same way with the relationship. How you saying it's going to be a framework that everybody is going to have specific things that they're going to talk about and
Right.
how they communicate. But then you have to learn how to tailor that towards your relationship. So
Absolutely.
that was something that you just brought to me. Okay, look at you.
I
Another
like that was a
another
good
gem.
metaphor.
You like that metaphor?
I do like that
You
metaphor.
can use it. You can use it.
Willie
You ain't even
Johnson.
got to tell them it was me. So let me ask you this: What with today and age social media? Social media. What we gonna before we get to social media? Do you think that it's good to have someone that likes to text all the time conversations when you're in a relationship? Do you think that's a good thing?
When you say text conversations, do you mean
Yes.
like long, you mean like the
Yes, yes, the one that like to text more than they talk on the phone. Do you think it's a good thing? And if so, or if not, why?
here I okay, let me preface by saying I'm here for all the realms of communication. I think that we
Mhm.
don't think outside the box enough with that. I think we have email, we have text, we have pictures, we can write letters, we can have post-it notes, we can talk on the phone, we can video chat, and the average couple does not really lean into all the, your spouse would be surprised if they got an email for you from you and it wasn't about logistics or responsibility. You just was sending them an email, they be like, okay, I don't think we do that. However, with texting and even with email, with written words, sometimes tones and certain things can be misconstrued and misunderstood. Now, there are people who are able to articulate their thoughts better when they write them down, right? So I know people, especially if they're more I'm a verbal processor. You probably are too. I like to talk things out. I talk to myself. This is me. My husband knows this. No surprise. He's more of a processor. And a lot of times for processors, they need to write it out. However, if you're talking about something deep, y'all, you don't want to be misunderstood or misconstrued. Even if you work better with pen to paper or texting, write it out first. Get your stuff out so that you can process in the way that feels good to you. But then have the conversation in person or as in person as you can. So if you're physically separated, get on that video chat. If you can't get on the video chat, get on the phone, because tone and those kinds of things, they do matter when we're talking about um, conversations that bring up a lot of emotion and things like that. So I wouldn't do that. And I wouldn't lean on the default of, but I'm a texter though. That's great. But for some areas, it's just not going to work well.
What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take this little part of the segment and I'm gonna put some money behind it, and we're gonna put this on social media and let everybody know. Listen, when it comes to texting, it's okay if you're at work, but when it's something serious, please call me.
Yeah.
Because I promise you, even from my perspective, I love talk to me on the phone. If you want to curse at me, you want to tell me I'm ugly or something, and what I got on is it don't look good. Tell me on the phone or in person. Don't text it to me, because now behind that text message, you might have said I didn't like your shoes, but I read I ain't like your shoes and what you had on and the way you walked into the room. It made me mad because you had them ugly shoes. You see what I'm saying? I don't read all of this stuff behind. Hey, I just didn't like your shoes, right? So then we just.
I'm sorry, but that can happen over the phone too. Now, Willie, be honest, they can.
Yeah, it can, but it's easier. It's easier explained over the phone, because now when you text, I don't like your shoes. Now I'm thinking, right, and I have to sit here and think about your text and what I'm gonna text you back. Why you didn't like my shoes? You saying I was ugly, right? But if you're on the phone, it's like, I didn't like your shoes. I think you should have wore these shoes because this look blah blah blah.
Right.
And in 2 minutes, 3 minutes tops, you have already dealt with something that could have been a problem. But a text message, by the time you get to the answer, I'm over. I'm getting a divorce.
Already in your imagination.
I don't even want to hear it no more. You done told me I'm ugly. My kids gonna be ugly. My grandkids and all of that just by telling me my shoes ugly. You know what I'm saying? So I think texting can help.
Yeah,
it works, but not all the time. I think people have to understand. Talk on the phone, but I really didn't. I think also too, like with online dating now, they have to do more video calling, especially in the pandemic.
Yeah,
and for you to bring that up. That hey, sometimes just video call.
Yes,
you don't really think about that. Like I'm gonna see you when I get home. Why I need the video call? That's sometimes is the thought process.
Yeah.
Right?
I love video calling my husband when I'm away from home or I'm, doing something else. I just did it a few weeks ago because I was away for the weekend. And, that's one of the first things that I think about. So yeah, but you touched on something really important there when you talked about what we make things mean. And that's something we really have to be careful about. And I did a whole little, you can do a funny spoof on this thing just because it's funny. It's like you're saying, you don't like my shoes, you don't like my shirt, or you don't want to go with me to the event, which you're embarrassed about me. You don't like spending time with me. You don't love me. You don't care about me. You can just start spiraling. Our imagination.
Out of control, right? Yeah.
Real talk. Let's be honest. Raise your virtual hand if you do this, because we can let our imaginations run with us, and we have to be in a space where we recognize when we start to spiral, when we start to think about what we're making something mean. This is something real important in my marriage in particular, because one of my biggest triggers is being misunderstood. So I can over explain, or in an effort to not over explain, I might not have shared it as clearly. And before he thinks it's something else, I've requested, hey, just ask me for clarity so that I
Mhm.
can clear up what's happening so that we don't get into an unnecessary argument or disagreement about what's been in our imaginations. We've had to pull each other back from that so that that doesn't happen. And a lot of times we're in that space of this is what you said, these are the facts, but this is what I made it mean, or this is what you made it mean. And now we're all in a tizzy, when the reality is, if you're naturally curious about things, if you are, like you said in another segment, and I completely agree, is if you are coming to the space for understanding before you're coming to the space to be heard, which is hard for people. But if you're coming from the place of understanding first and foremost, then you're gonna be naturally curious. You're
Yeah.
going to be like, well, this is what I think you just said. And so and be like, oh no, 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 this is what I'm trying to say. Oh, okay, and now we can move on instead of
Right.
having the stuff happen.
Yeah, I think that's you know, that's why I'm like texting, yeah. I could text, hey boo, how you doing? How your day going? But we need to talk.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm glad I said that too as well.
yeah,
How do you take it um when someone says, hey, we need to talk later?
yeah.
Do you think that people should say that or just wait to talk, right?
I
You,
said,
you,
yeah. I
just wait
love
to
it personally because
you
I
love
like
it.
to talk. Because if somebody said it to me, like we need to talk, I'm like, okay, great,
No, I'm
whatever it
saying
is.
later. We need to talk later.
Oh, you mean it's not right now,
Not right now.
and
Right.
it's something important, but now I gotta wait.
Yes. Yes.
Got you. Okay. So
Ooh.
see how we just did that? We just cleared that up. This is a case
Well,
in
you
point.
look at that. You see how quick that was? That was like
Yeah,
20 seconds. We
I
cleared it up.
know. Look
If
at
it was
that.
a text, it would have been about 5 to 10 minutes. Mhm.
That's a nuanced question. It really kind of depends. But I'll say this as a person who likes to talk out things right then and there. I don't necessarily want to wait. However, I don't have a partner for whom that's the case, so we have to come to an understanding to navigate that. But I, depending on who you're dealing with, I feel like it's okay to say, "Hey, I want to talk about X later." I mean, you don't have to leave it in full mystery mode, but if both of you are clear something's happening, and I'd like to talk about insert
Yeah.
specific thing here, but if you're blindsiding, if they're looking like, "Wait, what?" It's
What
like,
what what did I do
what
wrong?
happened? Right. And you're not, then you may want to do that in person and say, hey, this came up for me. I really like to talk about X, when you can talk about it now. But even then, sometimes you, depending on who you're dealing with, you have to have the discussion of, well, is this a time where you're ready to receive that? It's another thing I had to do with my husband, because we ain't always ready to receive what has to be said, and we have to decide we're going to receive it later. And this is the reality of communicating that folks don't actually do in their relationship, right? Of saying, like, if we're going to talk about it right now. But if the purpose is for them to be able to hear you, for you guys to understand, for there to be solution and resolution, then if they're not ready to receive, or you're not in a space to receive, you don't have the conversation right then and there.
Yeah.
But it's hard to pull away from that for certain people. And I will admit that that's something that I had to move into, because I had to learn how to deal with it with him, communicate with my boo.
Communicate with your boo. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Now, what would you say about people that how they look at, they see relationship goals, right? On social on the gram. The
This
hashtag
is making me
relationship
feel a
goals.
little old, I guess, because I'm like, I remember a time when there was no Instagram. So now,
Yes, yes. I can remember when you had to be brought in or invited to do Facebook.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, truth.
yeah,
Because it was
yeah.
only
I
for
was on
college
that
students.
MySpace. I was a MySpace guru.
That got,
That got yeah. But with the age of hashtag relationship goals, like what would you tell individuals now that's looking at people's relationship on social media and saying they want to be like that? Like what would you tell them to try to help them understand that what you see on the ground is not always what you see behind closed doors?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's exactly what we're saying in the beginning of this, because just like you can have somebody that idolizes that long-standing relationship that their grandparents had, you can look at something on social media or your next door neighbor and then you start coveting that, like Bobby and Sue always going on vacations, they went to the beach, you don't take me nowhere, you know what I mean? You don't know what Bobby and Sue are doing, you don't know. This is a fragment of their life and this is something that they chose to
Mhm.
show. When Bobby and Sue have an argument and they stop in the middle of it to snap a picture and put that on the gram, then talk to me, because we don't do that. When we don't put that aspect of our there's nothing really, unless you have really good writers who are kind of captioning out something that happened, but visually there's nothing really in the moments of turmoil, of the trials, of the rough seasons and the hard conversations that you're going to see on social media. So, but it's happening, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's happening for them just like it's happening for you. So I think it's the same thing that we said around really being able to decide what it is that you want, that it's okay if your marriage doesn't look like anybody else's marriage, that you have to decide what's aligned for you and who you're dealing with. Who are you and who is your spouse? And are you really taking that into account? Because nobody else is you and nobody else is them. You didn't marry yourself. There's a lot of acceptance that has to happen in a marriage that doesn't always happen, and take some time for people to really delve into.
How would you get someone to, how they say you can't teach old dogs new tricks, right? So
Hmm.
how would you get someone that is cut off and saying, let's for example, somebody they parents never did it. Their parents are still together, but they didn't communicate like that. They sleeping in separate bedrooms, because this is something that is actually becoming a norm.
Yeah.
People are not sleeping together and things. How would you tell someone, listen, that's not okay? It's not okay for you to be separate in one home. It's not like you all just not, living together. How would you, help someone, just or give them, not even saying just go through the whole help thing, but what would be something that you would give someone that feel like it's okay to live this way, separate,
Mm.
separate lives in the same home?
I say I don't believe that you feel like it's okay. That's what, that I mean, because and this is me, right? And so I maybe it's the New York in me, but I do, and I have to check myself. We have to check the things that we're saying because I hear people say I'm fine and I'm okay all the time. Like, oh,
Yeah.
it's great and I'm fine. I'm not, and I literally I feel like with what we do, we have to find those gaps and those contradictory moments, and we have to say, okay, but that's not real. So I would be like, well, first I was like, do you really think this is okay? What about this dynamic feels okay to you? And
Mhm.
they would have to answer that. And they may very well not have an answer around why it feels okay. Or they might feel like, you know what? They might come to it themselves. That it's not okay. It's not how they want it. It's not ideal. You want to touch, you want, you know what I mean? You want the legs to brush up against each other. You want, to have the sex. You want to enjoy each other's company, and you're not doing that right now. So I would say you're not okay with it, but I let them tell me like what is about this feels good to you. And usually it's because something's going down. Now I'm not saying that you don't take your space in your house. I
Yeah.
don't think space is a dirty word. I think that it
I
needs to,
like that.
yeah, it's not. People are like, space,
That's
what,
another
you
shirt.
don't
That's
love me?
another shirt.
You know,
Space is
right?
not a dirty word.
You gonna have me added to my merchandise
I'm telling you now. Yes.
but it's not. Space is not a dirty word. It's really integral. It's really important to our relationship. However, you can't just stay in that space and sweep things under the
Yeah.
rug. So if your desire, what you want, if you're telling me what you want is to come together, this is a desire, I want us to be close, I want to be in the same bedroom, then it's like, okay, well, what's blocking you? And how do we remove those blocks and how do we get there? Because you can't most people are not going to be happy with that type of situation. And it's going to trickle down to the kids. If you have children and those kind of things, they're going to see that dynamic. And so the first thing is get real about what you want. Don't be in denial. Don't be like, I'm fine. I don't care. I love people. I don't care. They so care. They were so passionate about, and I can't believe, da 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 da. But you know what? It doesn't even matter to me. I don't care. And I'd be like, no, but that's not true. You really don't care.
Uh,
And so we lie to ourselves so much to protect ourselves that's the first thing that you've got to do.
hold up. Let's go back to what you just said, right? We lie to ourselves to protect ourselves. Hashtag another shirt. That right there. Ooh, let's dig a little deep into that one. We lie to ourselves. You almost brought a tear to my heart. I just thought about that, girl. I lied to myself so many times, and it just hit home. We lie to ourselves to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, did,
Take
there,
a deep breath.
another gem, another gem. Give me them gems. I'm about to make a whole necklace. Come on. Now, with that, that is something that I think we need to expound on. Lying to ourselves to protect ourselves. Why do you think we do
You
Why,
know,
well, the statement answers the question,
yeah,
but why do you feel that we think that that's okay
yeah,
to do that?
yeah. Because protecting ourselves is a natural mechanism,
Mhm.
because the human experience involves a lot of emotions that hurt: pain, shame, guilt, um, feelings of dismissiveness or neglect. And we don't actively want to put ourselves in a situation to feel them, even though they're inevitable in our life experience. And
Yeah.
so we put up the armor because a lot of times for some people the dynamic in their marriage or in their relationship is that they feel like they have to constantly defend themselves. Like, how often do you have an argument and disagreement and the first thing that you go to is defense? No, I didn't do that. I didn't mean it that way. But you always say, you know what I mean? Like, what about you? And it's not
Mhm.
productive, but that's our knee jerk reaction because, again, we feel like we have to put the armor up. But a lot of times that armor is there to protect ourselves because you haven't created yet a foundation in the relationship to feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable and to be honest. So you lie to yourself. So I'm like, if I can't be honest with you, even though I really need to be, then how, and because I'm feeling this way and the energy's not going to go anywhere, it doesn't disappear just because you're quiet. You talked earlier about silence. Just being silent doesn't mean that things go away. They're like,
Mhm.
oh, I've had people, oh, it doesn't bother me. I just keep quiet about it. I'm like, but it's still in there. It comes out because you burn your spouse's biscuits on purpose because you mad, but you didn't say anything about it. You just gave them the burnt biscuit.
Getting them the burnt biscuit.
Gave them the burnt, and they're thinking like, oh, you just burnt the biscuits, and you're thinking like, that's what you get.
No.
But it's natural for us to want to do that, but we
Yeah.
have to be comfortable enough with conflict. The relationship with conflict has to shift. I had to, I because I was a conflict mediator, I was okay. I'm not seeking conflict out, but I'm okay with it when I'm able to talk to somebody who's open enough to go there, you know what I mean, with me, and let's do this then. Let's figure it out. And most people have a very uncomfortable relationship with conflict. They try to avoid it. So how do you avoid it? You're like, I ain't balls up, ain't about to,
Mhm.
you know.
Now that you explain it to me, I even see it even more clearly, right? Because although we know it's a lie, we can believe our lie quicker than someone else lying to us. And when it comes to that, but the crazy part is when we do something to hurt ourselves, we hold on to it longer than if someone else did. So it's like
Mm,
it's a catch 22. Um, but it definitely is. It makes sense when you said it, it just slapped me all in the back of my neck. Like, yes, this was you, because I was that person.
yeah,
You lie to yourself and say, you know what, it doesn't bother me. I'm all right. I'm
yeah.
cool. I let it go. But
Ugh,
then in your mind, you like, I wish I could take some scissors and cut the back of your hair. You know, I don't want to hurt you, but I want to take some of your hair away,
yeah,
put it on for a bang. I'm just messing with you.
yeah,
But it's crazy.
yeah.
That really is, that alone needs to be a whole nother segment.
Right,
Lying to yourself
right. All right, so second annual, we gonna hit that.
Second annual. We got remember this. Remember this.
Yeah.
So just tell me two things that to end everything, like to bring it all full circle. What would be two things that you would want people to know about communication and why they should um, learn how to communicate better to each other from how they need to be communicated to. See how I ended that? I got these
Oh,
two.
did y'all hear this question? He said, just give me two things of all of these things and these layers. But but one thing has always stuck with me around, they're like, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? So if the tree isn't growing, it's probably dying. If the plant isn't growing, it's probably dying. And if you're not, saying we continue to grow until then, but we continue to grow in the interim, and the relationship's the same way. And we can hear communication is key all day, every day. We've all heard it, but we have to actually implement it into our lives, because if not, you're not growing. And what does that mean for your relationship? And the communication piece is the freedom, is the peace. When folks tell me what I say, what do you want? They're like, I want support, and I want freedom, and I want more peace and connection and partnership. I said, this is the way that you get these things. Being able to be vulnerable, being able to feel like you have a voice, feel like you're seen, being able to really understand each other and feel heard. This is the cornerstone of intimacy. How on and popping your sex life is has a lot to do with what's happening when you're not having sex.
Mm,
So,
mm,
you if you're not connecting, you can still do what you do, but it's not going to be the same. So if you're not connecting on a level where you feel that comfortability, if there are times where you're not sure how to approach conflict, so you're just dealing in silence, that's a block to the intimacy in your relationship. You are blocking your opportunity for growth, your opportunity to elevate your marriage, and you don't want that. And you have it within you to move through. Like, what's possible is there. A lot of times people looking at me like, no, Imani, you don't know my life. And I'm like, okay, I'm listening, but I can still hold that possibility for you that you don't see. And, let's get you there. You know what I mean? And they're like, oh, okay. Cause people, it's hard to see. It's and I get it when you're in it. So I would say, don't block that opportunity. At least be open to making the shifts that are needed in how you're talking to each other so that you can move forward. And um and be cognizant of who you are and who your spouse is at all times, even as you are both growing,
yeah.
because we all want to be seen. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Yeah.
And it's crazy. And I just want to say this before we end. I was I know a guy that him and his wife they've probably been married now probably about 10 years, but he was into working out, right? And they worked out together, but then she had a baby, and when she had a baby, she gained weight. Um, but when she had the child, she was always with the child. He
Mm,
was working. So it became what he felt like he had problems because he couldn't get to the occasion. We don't not be so,
mhm,
vulgar, but he couldn't get to the occasion, right? Rise to the occasion. And when I was talking to him, he was like, man, I always try to talk to her and tell her, like, let's go work out. But she always talking about I got the baby, and somebody needs to watch the baby and how we gonna work out. And he was like, but I asked, let's work out at home. And then she said, well, I don't need if I don't work if I work out at home, I'm not going to really work out because I'm gonna be worried about the baby, right?
mm,
And I just kept hearing that you're not helping her.
mhm,
You're not helping her.
mhm,
So you not helping her is hurting you in the same sense. So now both of you are hurting
mm,
because you're not communicating.
mhm,
So that brought up what you were telling me, like how if you're not communication can hurt your intimacy,
mhm.
right? And he thought he had a physical problem
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah.
But then when he started stepping in and like he would allow her to get, a day or something to
Right.
have a baby,
Right.
now the roles on reverse where she don't got in shape. And he like, hey, look here now. Give me a break. Give me a break, girl. Give me a break. You
Yeah.
know. And it's funny because something as simple as talking, but it's very serious, but it's simple. Just open up your mouth and just learning how to express yourself
Right.
can save so much. But just looking at his situation, it's literally not. Sometimes we'll talk and he'll be like, man, listen, I think she gonna mess around and leave me a cheat because she
Mm.
be talking to me and she be like, listen, I need it. But the thing is that once he saw the problem, he communicated what he felt, she communicated, and then they met in the middle. It did change their relationship because they
Absolutely.
communicated with each other.
Yeah.
So I like to end that by saying I really appreciate you for allowing me to be your co-host. It's always a pleasure. We always gonna keep it real, raw. And we can't be too raw because some people not ready for it yet. We're gonna have to give them level one raw, level two, and level three. Now, when
There
you
it
get
is.
level three, we just gonna be wide open. So, if you don't want the wide open, don't go
Yep.
to level three. Just stick one and two, because level three take you up there. But I really thank you, sis. Once again, I'm proud of you for
Mm.
doing what you do. Continue to help build, help heal, help people understand the importance of communication, and help people find love again because we all need. We
Yes,
all need.
we do.
Yes. So
Thank
thank you very
you.
much. Yes.
Thank you so much.
All righty.
Right, you guys. But I know this is the last one. We're gonna keep the train moving.
Go
Y'all,
ahead.
y'all stay in touch
Yes.
our space because we still got some things going on to round out our weekend. Willie, thank you so much for
Yes.
agreeing to do this and help me flip the script this
Yes.
weekend. I appreciate you, brother. I do.
Well, all righty. Now, sis, you take care.
All right.
All
Bye.
right. Bye bye.